Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tuesday's edition of Locked On Seminoles. Today, we're going to explain why NIL is not ruining college football and why the number of draft picks that come from a team can be a bit misleading. Drake, hit that video and let's take the people into it.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Folks, welcome to Locked On Seminoles, your favorite daily Florida State sports talk show with your favorite daily Florida State talk people. We are Locked On Seminoles. I'm Max, that's Drake, and we are bringing you Florida State sports content every single day, Monday through Friday, as part of the Locked On Sports Network. Folks, we're over 1,000 subscribers now. We love you for it. I mean, really, I can't say the word thank you in a different way. I guess genuine.
Gracias.
Thank you. Yeah, gracias. Seriously, thank you for what y'all do. Thank you for coming here each and every day and for responding to the videos and for engaging with us and really making this platform more than just us yelling into the wind. It means a lot and we enjoy it. If you're brand new though, hit that subscribe button. Drake, how you doing, man? You guys can see I'm back in the Marietta office. I'm back in my main office. I feel good. I feel great. I'm having, I don't want YouTube to hit us with the sponsorship. I'm having a Sudsy beverage to celebrate a successful 7-hour drive. How's your day going?
I'm chilling, man. I'm chilling. Just, got off from a pretty productive day over at work and actually excited to basically talk about some FSU football because I think we have some great topics for today.
Yeah, we do. And I want to start with the NIL stuff because it's all anyone's talking about right now. And for those of you that don't want to whip out your phone and Google it, because obviously that would minimize your YouTube window and you'd lose us unless you have YouTube Premium, which I don't think anyone's ever paid for. But if you do, good for you. Just saying, hey, come on, man. Do you have YouTube Premium? Is that?
I got it with a package when I had to get the ACC network because the Comcast has no idea what to do with the ACC network.
Anyway, well, Drake, tell the people who Jordan Addison is, and I'll tell them why they should care.
Well, Jordan Addison, folks, for those who don't know, was the number one wide receiver not only in Pitt, but also the number one wide receiver for the nation last year and projected to be a top 5 pick in next year's NFL draft. Last year, he finished up with 100 catches, 1,593 yards, 17 TDs with an average catch of 16 yards overall. So he is, quite frankly, the most dangerous weapon in college football.
Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing, too. We have seen, so this is why you should care. We have seen how valuable wide receivers are in the NFL. The NFL is taking notice. And what were there, 8 wide receivers drafted this year before the second quarterback left the board? I mean, that is paradigm shifting when you look at it that way.
I think there was 6 in the first round.
Yeah, I think it was 6 in the first round, 2 in the second. So maybe there's a receiver, but point being, it was an 8-2 split receivers to quarterbacks when the second quarterback left the board. That is nuts. That's insane. So now you have the best receiver, arguably in college football, announcing that he may be going, or I don't know if he announced or his people announced, it got leaked to the media, whatever. But it is not like one of those Florida State leaks, like a real leak, that he is being courted by USC to the tune of a 7-figure payday to go play for 1 year before he goes to the league. Now, why does that matter? Because Jordan Addison at the time of the reports coming out was not even in the transfer portal yet. So we now have the first case of a young man essentially taking his marketing tactics and negotiating in the public sphere, just like you see in the NFL, just like you see in the MLB, just like you see in the NHL, any professional sport. And some people feel that this is the sum of all fears that they had about NIL, and life as we know it is over. Drake, are people right to feel that way? Is the sky falling? How do we feel about this?
My personal opinion is that the sky is not falling. Quite frankly, people have been tampering with kids and other people's rosters since probably the dawn of college football. We heard a lot. You hear a lot about it before even the transfer portal was even a thing, where basically you wouldn't go directly to the kid, but you would go to their handlers, to their street agents, to whoever is handling all their finance, to actually who's assisting them actually while they're in college. And then with this overall, I think it's more the fact that people are worried that how simple it is, that you can just offer a kid max amount of money. But folks, we already were offering these kids boatloads of money to come play for your school. Like, I did compliance for several years. There's a reason why those rules were in place in the first place, because people did it for a while and people continually were still doing it. So overall, the only difference is now that it's people are, I guess, more worried that, we can no longer put our head in the sand about it. Just to me, this is probably, I think it's only exacerbated maybe because of the transfer portal thing. And then also basically people are saying like, oh, how are the rich, the rich are only getting richer. Quite frankly, USC hasn't been good for a while. So it's actually kind of nice that, a team of that caliber, of a blue blood kind of pedigree, is actually somewhat, being talked about again.
Yeah, if USC is considered the rich, they've been very cash poor for the past few years at least. But here's
what's the term? They weren't liquid for a while.
They weren't very liquid. Yeah. Here's where I have an issue with this. Because Danny Cannell actually brought this up. I won't just try to pass his words off of mine. But I mean, you guys are getting a lot of Max Moody thought in here too. But he gave me the genesis of the idea. And he made a very valid point that the difference between USC going to a Pitt player and offering him a 7-figure payday to go play for USC versus the Jets doing that to a player for the Cardinals is that if the Jets do that to a player for the Cardinals, the Jets have to give the Cardinals some kind of indemnification for taking that player, unless that contract is completely expired and they're in free agency, but then that's on the Cardinals for not negotiating. If you have a player that's actively under contract, which you have a scholarship to the school, you're under contract for the intents and purposes of this, you will get indemnified for someone else poaching them. And that's fine. And I'm not saying that the poaching shouldn't happen. I do see where it's coming from when you're a school like Pitt and you get a player like Jordan Addison once in a blue moon, right? And then you've worked your butt off to recruit him. You've worked your butt off to keep him. You've paid him money to keep him, because when Pat Narduzzi was asked by multiple people like, hey, what's going on with this thing, whatever, he was like, oh, no, we're all set on it. I got a name wrong, didn't I? Oh, you had that face like I screwed someone. Sorry. But he basically said like, we're good on that, meaning they've paid the kid money as well. And they're just gonna have to eat the loss. They don't get draft picks. They don't get like a guaranteed 5-star next year. They don't get a trade. They don't get paid. They don't get cap space back except for one scholarship of their 85. And that kind of sucks. So I can see why smaller schools would feel like, hey, we're gonna get screwed. And you may. But I would also say that like this is in its infancy. I would rather go ahead. Sorry.
No. I mean, you're right. It's really new, and I think the term, I guess, is probably the most appropriate. And I hate saying it over and over again, but it's the Wild Wild West right now. It's basically extremely new. There's no regulations, and I think about beginning of last season, I basically said the NCAA was going to cease to exist very, very soon, and they have done absolutely nothing to even perform even any guidance with everybody else. And to me, with NIL, I mean, you're discussing it right now with the overall, basically, the players are leaving their teams. So what can they do about it? Well, I think, there's going to be a severe, and you discussed this too, a severe market correction that not only, I guess puts not guardrails, but like has parameters for NIL and transfer portal, but this is probably the first big step into hopefully actually viewing these college athletes. I won't even say student athlete anymore, because I think no one discusses the academics at this point when it comes to this, that overall that they become fully fledged employees for the institutions. And that's basically what we want to see actually going forward. And that, quite honestly, if you want to regulate something, or probably, hopefully, protect a lot of these kids, that's going to be the route that we go down eventually.
Yeah, I want to get into the regulations of it, because I think that is also a hot topic. We got to take a quick break with some local ads, but we'll be back in about 30 to 60 seconds. All right, so I want to get into the regulation stuff. And before I do that, I want to thank y'all for making us your first listen each and every single day. Like I said at the beginning of the show, it means a ton to us, genuinely. We spend the first part, well, technically the last part of our day making the content for y'all. And we love that you spend the first part of your day listening to the content that we make for you. Drake, the regulatory stuff is I think, the centerpiece of where this debate goes, because it's not about Addison Jordan Addison, right? He's got 2 first names. And ironically, both are also unisex. So you could have his name in either order for a man or a woman. Point being, what people want is they want to talk about, is this a failure of regulation? Should we have regulatory mitigations for this? And I want to make one point. As a former government affairs guy in my past life, I don't think this is a failure of the NCAA. It's a good, quick talking point to say, well, the NCAA just punted and they opened the door and now it's the Wild West. Now, that's not what you said. You just used the term Wild West. I'm not criticizing you. But I would much rather have had it happen that way, because essentially what they had was a plastic glove. And they said there may be holes in this. To find out, let's just dump some water in there and see where the leaks spring. Versus the NCAA, who we all know are really bad at rulemaking, trying to pre-make these rules and then us having to undo all the dumb stuff they did. So I'm kind of okay with this approach.
I'll take it one step further. It just shows how toothless and useless they are. I mean, that's kind of basically how, quite frankly, Max, you're a movie guy. I'm a big movie guy. I'm going to pass this off to you as a quote because I want you to quote this movie. Have you ever seen Office Space?
So what would you say you do here?
And you hear that Mark Ebert is retiring in the next 18 months. Quite frankly, it's kind of really nice that that's happening as, I guess, the NIL kind of going into full swing. I mean, just so overall, like regulating wise, me personally, I'm a big believer in the free market when it comes to these kids. Basically, they have made what basically as amateurism has been basically a folly concept since the beginning of, I guess, the 1960s for the sport. And overall, they're finally being able to, I guess, reap the benefits for that. And if we're going to blame anybody, blame the coaches. Blame Dabo Swinney making $10 million. Blame Nick Saban making all that money too. Eventually, you basically made it a non-amateur sport by bringing it in that much revenue and basically not sharing it. So now, quite frankly, you reap what you sow. Yeah,
but I do think that there needs to be regulation. I just think it's good that they didn't try to pre-legislate. They let's see the problems and let's correct, because I think that this is a real problem. What we're seeing with Jordan Addison is a real issue, because a school like Pitt, again, doesn't get a lot of Jordan Addisons. Bama gets one of him. They had 3 receivers just as good as him on their roster 2 years ago. And he right now, by the way, last year was the 4th most productive player by advanced stats in the country. So Pitt doesn't get any indemnification for the big.
I feel bad for Pitt. I just feel that this was already happening. If like we already heard like big time players from smaller schools already going over to the Alabamas, to the Georgias. And we saw, I think 2 years ago, Henry 2020, the linebacker from Tennessee. Tennessee was bad. Yeah. And then, hey, former 5-star, who's going to be a first-round pick next year, goes to Alabama. We're seeing this. I think the only, issue that people are having is that now money is involved, which we all know the crux of everything is, money does ruin everything with that.
Yeah. And money was, no, you're right. And I don't know exactly what the
and the figure being that high also definitely does turn people off too.
But to me, I'm fine with it, right? Hey, if you're a late bloomer and you want to move and you can go get more money, great. But I wouldn't be against something where, again, we standardize it where the money's coming from the school, not these unregulated business people that are basically doing 1099 deals with these kids for their name, image, and likeness in their NIL as they sign 5 autographs during the year, right? Like, I'm fine with that. But if you poach the kid from another school, you should have to indemnify them in some way. I mean, is it 10% of what you're going to pay the kid? Is it, a flat fee where you base it on the annual revenue of the 2 programs and say, hey, Bama, if you get a transfer from ULL, right, Louisiana Lafayette, here's your annual revenue.
Do you think then there could be a problem where you get a player? Do you think there could be a problem where a player that under the radar, 3-star, maybe even 2-star prospect goes to a smaller school and then just for his first 2 seasons there is lights out and is being seen as an NFL draft pick? Do you have a worry that I guess the institution will be like, we know that you're a higher caliber, that you should be here, so we're going to help you look for somewhere else, and they'll probably basically looking for their own wallets instead of actually how good the team is, because that could be an issue too.
Yeah, but they do that when they load up their kids on the bus to go get their heads kicked in by top ranked teams. I mean, they already do. Like, that's already a thing at the group of 5.
No. I'm not talking about FCS. I'm talking about like a school like a Pitt doing that.
I'm saying, like, if it's going to happen anyway, there will always be bad actors. I don't know what the exact solution is. I think that's a very valid question.
Yeah, because I don't know what
does Duke start? Do they pull a Miami Marlins? Sorry to bring up painful memories and start selling their team for parts because they've got like 2 good running backs and like the rest of their team's terrible.
Hey, listen, man, we got 2 rings. Your team is 1. I'm just going to leave it on there.
I'll say this. I don't think the amount of money would be enough in my mind to incentivize that. And in fact, I probably should have led with this one that I talked about in pre-production. I could almost see maybe there's a repayment of what you've spent on the kid's scholarship or what you spent on the kid for, NIL money or something like that, but just some way where these big guys aren't going to come in and like what we did to Albany with Jared Verse. It was going to happen anyway, but we have to pay Albany like $1.2 million for the privilege of beating them on the field. It wouldn't give me a lot of heartburn that we'd have to pay them for the privilege of taking taking their best player by, leaps and bounds.
Because it's hard. It's really, it's really, really hard. And we're not going to have the answers for this for probably until I have more gray hair. And this is probably down to my ass crack. But overall, it's a difficult conversation. And I mean, it's like, for one thing, I'm just happy that these kids finally are getting compensated for what they're worth. And with the schools, I am going to feel bad they're losing these players, for the fan base, for their teammates too. But also, like, this is basically, capitalize on what you can now, because we just saw with Justin Ross, my man did not get drafted. He was a potential top 10 pick. And now he basically barely got medically cleared. Like, thankfully the Kansas City Chiefs took him, but I wouldn't have hearing about all the story with his, I think it's KSF, I think is what the diagnosis was for him. So it's like, you do what you got to do, honestly.
Yeah, no, I don't fault the players at all. Like I said, the only thing I'm starting to have some heartburn with is the small schools getting poached, but that, like you said, happens anyway. So I don't think because something happens anyway, we just,
it's still not okay.
It is right.
Yeah.
But I think the big, I think the big schools should be allowed to do it. I think the kids should be allowed to go make money. But right now, it's just like there's the small schools are the losers here. And I know we're probably headed to a, super league that is basically the Power 5 minus 10, 12 teams. I'm not naive to that fact. I don't know. But the last thing I wanted to get your opinion on before we move on to talking about Florida State's draft picks and only having one person drafted, and is that a symptom of bad recruiting, or is that going to cause bad recruiting down the road because kids feel like they might not make it to the NFL on our roster, is an interesting point brought up by Dabo Swinney. And if y'all listen to the show ever or look at like the pictures and diplomas on my wall, you'll know that I agree with Dabo Swinney almost never. Like, yeah, the number of times we agree, it rhymes with hero. And this was an interesting point, though. He brought up the academics and he said, look, the minute a kid becomes an employee and I'm paying him, then I'm going to have the right to cut that kid if he drops 3 balls in a game and I'm not happy about it. And you think about what that does for a kid's academics. Like, imagine junior year, you're in school, you're taking 12 credits, you're on pace to graduate in 3 semesters, and they're like, hey, by the way, you don't go here anymore. You're like, wait, what? Like, unless you have $100,000 to pay for this, by the way, but you don't go here anymore starting today. And I thought that was a really interesting point. Now, the obvious solution is, hey, there should be some regulation against cutting kids. But to do that, you're going to need a union. And right now you have 85 kids. I should have done this math before. I apologize. But you have 85 scholarship players on 129 FBS teams. That is 10,900. I think there's 131 now because we just brought Liberty and one other one up. That is 11,135 kids who know very little about business, know even less about the law, have, what do you figure? Let's say at least 2.5 per kid advising them. So you're adding 27,837 advisors on top of that. You think you're going to get all of them into a union? By the way, the rules are different in every conference that they all play in. And the school rules are different at every school they all go to. So what's your take on the minute they become employees, the kids losing those kinds of protections?
I mean, frankly, that's definitely I didn't know he said that, and I'm actually surprised that Dabo made a damn good point because that's actually a really good point.
Right. I was shocked. I was so mad it was Dabo that said it. I was like, could it not have been? It could have been Steve Spurrier. I would have rather Steve Spurrier.
He probably followed up with some dumbass remarks too afterwards with that too. We're being honest here, but no, like to me, I eventually do see these kids becoming employees because I do think the unionization of these athletes is going to happen at the same damn time. And primarily, I think once you hear the union talk happening, I think that's actually when you see the SEC breaks off, the ACC breaks off, and they do form the super conference, that super league, and that's when you're going to have each conference has probably a union head, probably headed by a former player, like someone like Mackenzie Milton's, got stature, but probably someone that has a little more experience with the business world and also handling sort of things. And then, I've discussed it at length with a Dan Lussey, sports attorney, Darren Heidner, the same thing, that this is eventually where we're going to, because these kids do need protections, because once you start making money, it's a lot more dangerous, especially when it's with other people's money. And they definitely need to be careful of that.
Because you're an investment now. And you look at the number of college athletes who are the first kid to ever go to college in their family, and they get that degree, and you see how much that helps them out in the future. Jordan Travis is a great example. I don't know if he's the first one to ever go to college, but we talked about yesterday his prospects of the NFL. If he plays on an NFL roster, it's not going to be for long, I'd imagine. So that degree is legitimately going to help him substantially throughout his life, because unfortunately, a college degree is, for better or worse, the gateway to white collar employment these days. Shouldn't be, but it is. So what, you take that away from him? That part, I hadn't thought about that. It gets messy. Now, my solution is you just stick them under the NFLPA. You drop this charade that it's not a minor league for the NFL. And like they do in baseball, you just say, hey, let's expand this union. Let's capture the players under it. And let's have a college division of the NFLPA. We're your farm league anyway. I'm sure there's a lot of that I haven't thought through, but something like that.
We'll talk about that at a different time, because I don't think the NFL would ever buy that, because they do love their pseudo minor league system they have going on right now.
That they don't have to pay for. That they don't have to provide legal fees for.
They don't have to pay for, and also that they don't have to compete with televised wise. There's a reason why you don't get Saturday Night Football games until the end of December.
Yeah, they have some agreement or whatever. But folks, here's the thing: if you guys like college football as it is, or if you like college football as it's becoming, or if you want college football to be totally different, that's fine, because BetOnline will let you gamble on it all the same. BetOnline.net has odds, lines, props, info, stats, all the things that you need to make educated bets and to place them quickly and place them efficiently and hopefully win some money. Drake, you got anything you like in baseball coming up, or in the hockey playoffs or anything? But yeah, folks, go to betonline.net, make an account, use promo code LOCKEDON when you make your account, and they will give you a 50% welcome bonus up to $100. So you put in $100, you get 50, and you are ready to rock and roll. betonline.net, where the game starts.
St. Louis Blues to win the series are plus 122. They've been there before, and the Wild have never been there. Take care.
So, folks, again, thank you for dropping by, and we hope that this has been a bit of a welcome deviation from our previous our usual conversations, but we want to bring it back to Florida State talk. So, Drizzy, my dad actually asked an interesting question. He was like, hey, so let me pull up the tweet that he shared by former disgraced journalist, or currently disgraced journalist.
You do know when you read the tweet out, everyone's gonna know exactly what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. It's an Irish Sheffield tweet. It's not anything bad. I'm kidding, guys. Ira's not disgraced. It's an inside joke. I actually like Ira. I've met him in person one time. Very nice, very gracious guy. So he said, second time in the last 3 years that FSU has had only one player drafted. Before 2020, it hadn't happened since 2009. So, my question then becomes, is that a symptom or is that a cause of down recruiting? Obviously you don't get great recruiting classes. You don't have a lot of draft picks, but also we went over this, I believe yesterday, and you look at the talent that Florida State has brought in from a recruiting standpoint since 2017. So let's see. So a 4-star recruit, the way it's done is that the 5 stars in each class should be your first picks, your first round picks in the corresponding draft class. So what, this year was 2022. So that means the 2019, right? 2019 recruiting class. Yeah, the 2019 recruiting class is 5 stars, should have been the 32 first round picks this time. It's obviously not like that, but that is the theory behind the stars. So since 2018, keep in mind, Florida State has only had one person drafted 2 of those 3 years. Since 2018, and I'm excluding 2021 and 22 because those guys aren't draft eligible yet, we have had that number. We've had 42 4-stars.
Okay.
That's not right. That can't be right. We've had 23 4-stars. Sorry, the 2 monitors, one blocks the other in this mode. 23 4-stars in draft eligible time period. And we've had 42 3 and 4 stars. We've had none of them are 5 stars in the recruiting service I pulled from, but I know Dent kind of, let's not get into that. The point is 24 guys that should have been drafted by the rating system coming out of high school. If you look at that as a recruit and you're like, wow, Florida State's gone this year, by the way, we had one guy drafted and he didn't actually, he's not included in that list. So he doesn't count because he was a transfer. Do you think that weighs on recruits, or do you think that that's just a symptom of the hand we've been dealt, the non-panning out of the draft of the recruiting classes and all the things we talked about yesterday?
It's both of them. And primarily because it's like kids obviously look to see where kids get drafted, right? Like I want to say it was 2019 when Brian Burns was the last first round pick that we had before Jermaine Johnson this past week, right? Same measurables, same position, supposed to go around the same time, but then Jermaine fell because of some fake character concerns that, we're going about. But overall, like kids do care that they want to be developed because at the end of the day, football is a means to an end for a lot of these kids. And also it's an avenue for them to get paid very, very handsomely to play a game that they, have been loved and been doing, since they were kids. And then also like it just showcases where like the roster as well too. It's like we haven't been able to get these kids in and it's starting to show up. I mean, we had 2 in 2019. I think it was Brian Burns and DeMarcus Christmas. We had 1 in 2020. I think it was Cam Akers. And then we had 4 last year. I think it was Asante Samuel, Joshua Kando, Janarius Robinson, and the homie Hamza Nasruddin. So right there, we had a lot there, but now it's trying to showcase that this team doesn't have the consistent talent that we were used to every single damn year. I mean, we saw Cincinnati had 9 from the group of 5 get drafted. And it's not only just us. You see, Miami only had 1 kid drafted, and it was in the last 10 picks in the 7th round. Florida only had 2. So overall, like across the board, this might be also indicative of just how hard it is to keep some of these at-home Florida kids actually probably at the big 3 schools. So maybe it's even indicative of an even larger problem.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I don't want people to think that we're saying that players drafted means all that much. It does to a degree, but LSU also had 10 players drafted. They won like 7 games. So,
10?
They had 10 people drafted.
No, 10. You're right.
Yeah.
Damn,
yes,
10 kids?
Max.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So like they won 6 or 7 games, and Cincinnati got to a playoff, and LSU had 1 more player drafted than them. To be fair, they did win a championship 2 years ago. So it's a little more recent. So there are some of those kids. But that being said, I do think it hurts your national brand, because I think in the same way, did you hear Arthur Blank, his comments about Desmond Ridder when he first saw Desmond Ridder?
Yeah, that he was at the Notre Dame games to watch Notre Dame, and he's like, right. Oh, damn.
This kid that's beating Notre Dame in Soldier Field might actually be able to throw the football a little bit. So in the same way that being on a better team gets you noticed by college scouts, having your name called a lot during the NFL draft, that gets noticed by recruits. And maybe they're not watching draft day, but have y'all seen Nick Saban's pitch that was going around of what he says to recruits? He sits them down and he says, hey, we've had X number of players at your position drafted in the past 3 years. We've had X number of players total drafted in the past 3 years. In the past 3 years, kids drafted from our program have made X amount of money combined, which is an average of X millions of dollars per kid per year. You're a 5-star kid. You want to make that kind of money. If they could do it, don't you think you could too if you went to Alabama? And the answer is, well, yeah, Mr. Saban or Coach Saban, that makes sense to me. That's a logical argument. What do we have right now? Hey, so in the past 3 years, we've had like 4 guys drafted and half of them were transfers. But, could you see yourself becoming a draft pick? It's just not as compelling of an argument. So
no,
it hurts recruiting.
It does hurt recruiting. And then it also shows like it's really weird because it's also, I don't think it's as indicative on the staff when it comes to developing these kids. I mean, Jermaine Johnson already had all the talent in the world because he was behind basically the Avengers on the defensive line in Georgia. But it showcased how John Papuch was like, hey, I was able to basically help Jermaine, develop better as not only a run starter, but also a pass rusher too as well. And then you're still able to point to these kids. It's harder when we're developing these kids and they look good for even when you only have one example. You're now able to showcase that. And it also looks worse when people in your own conference, like Pitt had 2 picks. Wake Forest had 2 kids drafted.
Right, because it's the who didn't affect, right? Right. So when you say, hey, we had 2 guys drafted last year, they go, yeah, so did everybody. I mean, there were only 10 FBS Power 5 programs, by the way, that didn't have someone drafted. So,
shout out Texas.
Yeah, go Texas. And Louisville, surprising, but I think Louisville's going to have 3 or 4 next year. So they'll bounce back.
Weird. That's so weird to me. I thought they would have had at least 1.
But the point is, right, 2 is nothing. And it is let me put it this way. I don't think a good recruiter is going to be actively hurt by not having a lot of draft picks out of that school. But it is a weapon, a powerful weapon they do not have at their disposal to use while recruiting a kid.
And also, I think it's worse if your team is not producing on-field results. If you are still exactly, if you're basically like LSU, that's a good example. With 10 kids picked. Oh yeah, I mean we only had 7 games. We won 2 years ago. Derek Stingley Jr. has been projected as a first-round pick for the past few years. We have been able to showcase that overall. If your team isn't doing well, you can't really find the point in anything, and that it hurts. It hurts.
Yeah. No, that's right, Drake. And that's a really good point, I think, to wrap on. You'd have to be pretty naive to think that these conversations with recruits don't get aggressively candid. And I'm sure that is a talking point. Hey, look, I think we're going to put it together on the field. I think we're going to have 11, 12 wins next year under me, Brian Kelly. Drake, we'd really be excited if you come play for us. But here's the thing, man. If I don't put it together immediately, because I'll be honest with you, I've been walking around Baton Rouge. There are some cracks, and other coaches, I'm sure, have told you that on the trail. But if I don't put it together immediately, we're still going to get you to the NFL. You're still going to be a first-round pick and make $27 million in your first 4 years. So you can rest assured if you come to LSU, you're going to be taken care of. But I think we're also going to get you a ring in that process. And that's super powerful, and we can't say that. We're just
the only reason I'm going to decline you is because you didn't do it in the Bayou Brian voice.
I thought about it, and I was like, I don't want to go for the throat on poor Brian Kelly today. But look, at LSU, we are a family, and I want you to come have some gumbo with me. Anyway, all right, before I get down this train, folks, thanks for stopping by today. I know from everyone here at Locked On Seminoles, myself, Drake, Baby Yoda in the background, Dave, and all that goes into it, we genuinely love and appreciate your support. It means a ton to us, and we hope that the nuggets we bring you mean a ton to you. We know that it's a long off season ahead. We've got about 3 more months till fall camp and 4 more until kickoff. But if you're listening to a Florida State football podcast right now, well, you're just as crazy about the team as we are. And hopefully you're just as confident that we'll get the ship headed back in the right direction. That was Drake. That was Baby Yoda. I'm Max. And this was Locked On Seminoles.
Take care, everybody. And best of luck to all these signed FSU players. Andrew Parchment, Jordan Wilson, Kiera Thomas, to us all out there.